And we do have extra money, and that's like beautiful because we can give then to the community. House just burned down last weekend. We can make a donation to the people, to the Little League field, to the theater. It's incredible that out of the junk comes jobs, comes saving money, and comes also philanthropy.
This is Peak Moment. We are living at a peak of human innovation, information, wealth, and health. But we're also at a peak of population and consumption, with rising temperatures and declining resources fueled by cheap oil and gas. Peak Moment Television, bringing you examples of positive responses to energy decline and climate change through local community action.
Hi, welcome to Peak Moment. I'm Janaea Donaldson. On Orcas Island, when you decide to take your stuff to the dump, you don't just go to the transfer station where you can get your stuff offloaded and the recycle center that you can recycle your recyclables. You get to have one more special stop, and that's where we are. I'm at the Exchange with its lead creator, George Post. The Exchange, which is now part of the Orcas Recycling Services, is how old and how did you get this started?
It's 1983 we started it.
So we're what, 30 plus years? No, 20 plus years?
20 plus. We had our 20th anniversary here a few years ago. Yeah, we started it because they were going to close our dump. And the dump was a place where people got things. You know, you could throw things, but there was always the stories of treasure.
So people were able to just take things out of the dump and be able to use them here.
Sure, it was an old-fashioned dump. And then, of course, laws changed and it had to become a sanitary landfill.
Yes.
And then you didn't have access to the dump anymore. And so we who still wanted to have access went to the county and said, can we have a place where we can save the good stuff? And pretty much like put a filter on the waste stream, like a kidney or something, so that we pull out the good stuff.
Yes.
So they said okay, and we moved the old recycling building from town, where we collected cans and bottles. We took it apart in several big pieces and moved it out here. And a donated floor that was in parts we put under it and opened up and said, bring your stuff. And now 20-something years later, we're an institution, pretty much an institution on the island where you can buy almost, or at least get almost anything you want.
You have an astounding, I mean, you have a kind of, we'll show pictures in a moment,
Right.
But you've got a kind of encampment here of lots of tented and covered spaces with, this is richer than a thrift store. I mean, it's sort of an outdoors with covers, with roofs.
Well, it's like a thrift store, but because it's outside, we have to protect things as much as possible. And we never know exactly what we're going to have, so we don't devote permanent space to any real long time because we may not have any desks, we may not have any. We have a lot of bicycles, though. It's a hilly island, and people bring their bicycles, but they don't ride them. And so they bring them to the Exchange in hopes that someone else with more energy, perhaps. But that's the function, is bring the things that you think you don't need right now. And it's like your garage, only everybody has access to it.
That's a good picture of it. You know, your garage has got all the odds and ends of stuff that you need once in a while, and this is the community garage.
It is.
I like that.
And it's become the first stop for many people who come to the island with very little, perhaps, and love it, and say, oh, I need a bed, I need pots and pans, and they come here.
You've got electronic gear, you've got phones, you've got rototillers. I mean, it's like the range is bigger than I've seen it at most thrift stores.
Well, everything that we think still has value, we try to save. And when we can't get rid of it, then we have to throw it away, and then we have to pay the high price to get rid of garbage. And that's one of the strongest points about this function is we have probably the most expensive disposal garbage in the world, and it goes off island 300 miles to a regional landfill. So part of the deal when we closed the landfill here was we're going to reduce our waste stream as much as possible. And part of it is recycling, and this is another whole part of it is reuse.
Now, I want to go back to the beginnings on this one a little bit.
Yeah.
You came to the county, or the whoever it is that runs your transfer station.
The county.
The agencies there. Did they donate the land? Did they know the buildings? Well, I mean, what did you have to do? What kind of hurdles did you have to go through administratively to getting this to happen?
Well, we're, I think, very lucky in that respect because there is no entity other than the county on Orcas Island. There's no incorporated areas. And so we went to the county, which at that time was run by 3 commissioners, and we said, we'd like to set up shop there, can we? And at that time they were developing this whole transfer station concept because the landfill was closed. So they said, well, you can put a building there, and I told you how we got the building.
Right.
And we had to form a corporation so that we had a legal entity. So we formed a nonprofit corporation called Orcas Recycling Services. And then we pretty much did what we wanted to do, and they let us. And that's probably the most fortunate part of our whole existence is the county, we don't pay rent. We have no overhead except electricity and insurance, and we have to pay for all the garbage that we generate ourselves.
Right.
So and then we do pay our workers now.
Aha.
So it used to be a volunteer 1 day a week thing, and now it's 5 days a week, and we have usually 2 to 3 people here.
So
every day.
You're doing well enough on the donations that people are making, buying things here to do insurance, which is tremendous, because that's a big obstacle in our areas is the high cost of liability insurance.
No, we're very lucky here because the lack of bureaucratic institutions, so to speak, allow us to be kind of just marginally in a niche that works for everybody. And I think if we were in other circumstances, I know you have to have, I think a facility like this has to be located at a transfer station. And that's one of the problems with other communities that I've talked to about this is people come with things they want to get rid of, and they want to get rid of them one way or another.
Yep.
And if they come to us and we say, no, we can't take this, this, or this, then they have to make another trip somewhere else, perhaps.
Yes.
Here, you come in, and it's the way I think it should be. You have the opportunity to do the whole hierarchy of recycling, which is reduce, or maybe not bring it at all, reuse, recycle, then take it to the transfer station and cart it off island. But this is the first line of defense, I think, for changing to a more sustainable, consumptive society, so to speak.
Sure, we're just, I mean, we're so overloaded with stuff, and that waste stream is so big.
And to tell you the truth, this whole thing, even though it looks like a materials kind of place, our main function is education.
Really?
And the education comes about, I think, by just looking at the quantity and the variety of stuff and saying, oh my gosh, this is actually excess. So people kind of get an education right there. I think when I was working here, which was like for 14 years, it was for me an opportunity to engage people's sense of value because we don't price anything. It comes in here at supposedly 0 value because the person who had it said,
it's no more value to me.
Right. So now we have a 0, but we know it's not 0. And so if you look at it and you say, to me it is, and the question that was always on my mind and I would always propose to people was, what's it worth to you?
Yes.
And put it in your value system, compare it to a cup of coffee or a hot dog or something you're going to use every day for the rest of your life perhaps. What is it? What is the value to you? Which is not the normal way of getting things in our culture, which has a price on it. And you don't have to. You don't have to.
You're not asking. I mean, you're really asking people to think deeper here.
Oh, yeah.
What is the value to you compared with other things in your life, compared with the life of this object?
Yeah, and here it's like If you have to pay $40 now, maybe to go to the mainland and back,
Yes.
then okay, can you get this here, and not
Instead of going to the
instead
line,
and the gas you
on
spend and the ferry boats and lunch
Yes.
you have over there, and you spend $100 to get an item you can get here for whatever you think it's worth to you.
Yes.
So that island economics is a major part of the reuse, because we're getting maybe 2 or 3 or 5% of what it would sell for normally, perhaps as a donation, and that wouldn't, all that other money that would have been spent on new things to replace what you need doesn't go away.
I was just saying, your money stays right here
It
on
stays
the
on the island, and everything to do with the island gives us more of a reason to be involved in reuse, because to get things to the island is very expensive.
Yes.
To take things away is very expensive, so it only makes sense to, everything we have here is like raw material to nurture our lives.
I think you and Orcas, my observation is you've got island consciousness in a lot of ways that many groups will need, who are on the mainlands, will need to begin to think of as their region or their locality as a kind of island. Yes, things get imported in and things get exported out, but if we think of ourselves as a connected island, if you will, in keeping most of our materials and our raw materials and our resources and our labor and our money and our food locally grown, all of that, I think that's part of that sustainable culture we're all wanting to foster.
The island forces that, because we have real boundaries, and in a way that's a gift, because it forces people to see themselves as a community, where it's much more difficult on the mainland, I think, to say where your boundary is.
Yes, and of course. It's messy that way.
So it forces us into more of a sustainable mindset, and things is a big part of our culture.
It is.
And so we're just making use of, I use the garden, I have a garden, and as a metaphor, this to me in the garden would be the compost pile. This is where you bring all the used up stuff and you pile it up, and then you reuse it as a nutrient back to the community. And this is exactly that. It takes industrial compost, more or less. But these are smart parts. They're all fashioned. It's not raw materials. It's not by the pound. It's by the shape. And the shapes can be used in a multitude of ways. And that's one of the beauties here, is the creativity that comes out of looking at things not as, oh, that's a weight machine. You look at it as, oh, those are weights. I can use them for
this other purpose.
For something else.
So you really got, this is sort of like, in a way, the art store, or the art materials store, or the building materials store, or whatever, to allow that kind of creative thinking. If you look at that building
over there, Janae, it says art on it.
Yes.
And that stands for appropriate recycling technology.
Appropriate
is the
recycling
keyword.
technology.
Everybody knows what recycling.
Sure. So
recycling technology, but appropriate recycling technology means at the time, at the place, for what reason, and is it appropriate? You know, if you come in here and buy, a really good working wood stove to use as an anchor because it's heavy, it's not appropriate. Okay. So
it's not the best use of that.
And so we try to get to the highest use for that particular thing at that particular time. And that's what appropriate recycling technology is about.
I will add that you have a wonderful sense of place. So something we will show is that on your wall that says art, appropriate recycling technology, you also have some works of art that people have made from things they've found here, which is just a delight.
Yeah, well, that's one of the best parts of it. I mean, that's the highest level of reuse, I think. The highest level is creativity and art. Because, I mean, what are we here for? Once we have all of our food and shelter and everything, then it's for fun, isn't it? I hope.
I do too.
Okay, so that's the art part, is creativity.
And having fun, which you've done here. You have had fun here, it seems to me. A lot of work and a lot of fun.
Well, it is fun. It's fun trying to make chaos out of order. You know?
To make chaos out of order.
Did I say that wrong?
No, we We need both.
For sure, it's the other way around.
Let's pause for a minute and let's go take a look at another spot of your
Good.
order that you're creating out of chaos. Well, you know, you have created an immense amount of order.
It sometimes looks that way.
I mean, I'm astounded. You've got, you know, here are the containers for plants, and down there are building materials and glass, windows, and shelving. I mean, it's just the job of just knowing what's here for your staff, to know what's here and where things belong. I mean,
it's more than you think. It's not a simple job at all. You have to know what everything is. That's why our newest employee is great. He's old enough to know what things are.
What is this weird thing? Yeah, he's lived long enough to know that.
And he knows. We used to have contests around here. If something came in, nobody knew what it was. We'd put it out front and say, if you can identify it, you can have it. You know?
Well, it seems to me that there's not a lot that is going to the waste stream that's still usable that you don't have a space for.
No, we try to keep everything. Sometimes it's difficult because rain and various things have to be kept, you know, covered. We're trying to preserve the value of this.
And creatively so. I love all the little tents and all the little roofs, sort of like all the little rooms that you have for these.
Creativity is a big part of what we do here. The school children have been very enthusiastic when we go into the school and show them how to use things in a new way, and they love to take things apart. And people have an affinity for finding things.
Yes.
And I think this is maybe a major point in the future of our society, is that deep down in our reptilian selves, there's this desire to save and to make use and to find interesting things. And I've been the recipient of so many confessions of recyclers that come, oh, I remember when I went to the dump with my uncle, and we used to come home with all this really good stuff. But by and large, you can't touch any garbage now because of laws and all kinds.
I agree when I go to our landfill, our transfer station, because I see the people next to me, and it's like, that's usable firewood. Those are tiles that could be on somebody's small sink. You know, it's like, it's just painful.
Well, they like it. They like to save stuff, and this gives them the opportunity to leave it if they don't want to throw it away, and to find stuff. And that finding part is,
maybe it's all of our dreams about magic treasure. And this is just the treasure place.
Well, it is to a lot of people. I know the Odyssey of the Mind program here in the local school, they have to solve these problems and design solutions. And this is one of the first places they come, because you can get things at your price.
Yes.
Or we usually donate things to those kinds of. We've been in the schools many times to teach recycling and worm composting. And that's part of the outreach of Orcas Recycling Services, besides the exchange, is returning educational opportunities, and we put on plays, and we actually have an excess of funds that comes in because of donations.
I was going to ask about the economics.
Well,
an excess of funds. So you're not only paying your staff, paying your insurance, your electricity.
Right. Well, we pay our staff
wonderful.
just not a lot, but enough for the people who believe in this to be satisfied. And we do have extra money, and that's like beautiful, because we can give then to the community. House just burned down last weekend. We can make a donation to the people. There's the band shell in town. We were able to contribute to that. The Oil Spill Association were able to contribute. We just purchased a park in Olga, my community, a little community park, and we were able to donate money to that, to the Little League field, to the theater. It's incredible that out of the junk comes jobs, comes saving money, and comes also philanthropy. It's just a win.
It's like it's a beautiful picture all the way around, because it's like in any natural system, there is no waste. It just gets used for the next service. And I see that you're bringing, not only your goods are staying on the island, but you're bringing money back into your community. I mean, this is all local, totally local.
Totally, and the bottom line, I guess, if you want to use that, is community is the most important thing we're doing here, is keeping people knowing what's in their community, knowing the resources, being able to rely on other people. It's, I mean, to me, it's some of the most satisfying work I've ever done. Even though it seems humble in some ways, it's really the highest level of community engineering.
Well, you think about it. Well, you know, the meek will inherit the earth.
That's what I think. Well, the people who go through the garbage dumps in Cairo,
yes.
they pick out every, I mean, I picked up a lens, and there's some wire. They pick up everything. I've visited dumps all over, and I've seen, I mean, this is the state of the art, even though it looks kind of haphazard in some ways.
Right.
It's the nature of the work is that it's spontaneous and it's appropriate. It's what you can do with what you've got when you can do it.
You bring up a very good point. You talked about the Zabadin or the other folks in Cairo that are collecting the garbage and recycling a huge amount of that. They're also doing the recycling,
right,
if I understand.
Yeah.
And I would imagine that in that culture where there is less affluence and there's less stuff, I mean, it occurs to me, I'm backing in the other direction, that you are solving here one of the problems of the hyper-industrial world. We have too much stuff, so much stuff.
Yes.
And much of it built for obsolescence. The job of returning it back in and get another use, this is one way to do that.
Well, there are some major ways we could. If we could get all this stuff on a barge and take it to some third world developing country where they could have access to all these bicycle frames and machinery, and their needs would dictate then a new use for all of that stuff that we don't even imagine here. But that could be the nature of the future if the system were ever to kind of break down, that all this stuff would then have a much higher value.
That's true.
And that's kind of what it keeps me involved forever, is I've got to have a place to store the good stuff so that when we don't have the boats running every day and all the conveniences of our culture, we're going to want some plastic containers for our plants, and we're going to want to be able to do more things with our hands.
Yes.
And this will give us at least some resources to trade between each other.
So George, I want to know what advice you can give to other communities who want to follow your model, or what kind of hurdles they're going to meet. I mean, how can you help this happen for others?
Well, I'd love to let, I've gone out and talked to other communities, and one of the problems that they are going to face is that the laws around safety issues usually won't allow public access to their garbage anymore. So you have to get upstream a little ways from disposal at some site that allows things to come in before they're declared garbage. And that's the difficulty, is finding an adjacent site or on the same site. As I mentioned, it's best to have it where people can have the choice. And that's we've been kind of legislated out of contact with our waste. And so now we're going to have to find a way to I mean, there's Salvation Army and there's Goodwill that take things in communities.
But it's a different place. I can see your logic in that you load in your garbage, and then you load in your recyclables, and you load in your reusables, and you dump them off all in the same trip. Right,
and that's great if there is no alternative. There's no alternative here there is no Goodwill, no so this is our version, and that's the appropriate part of recycling technology. What do you have in your community? Where is your space? How is it laid out? What are your rules and laws? And what other facilities are around that are already doing maybe something like that? And see if you can integrate them more in and get that filter on the waste stream so that people make that choice about, this still has some value. There's still some place to take this. And recognizing that value, and more with things I think going to become more and more difficult to have someday, those things that are already manufactured are going to be much more valuable.
And thus have longer lives.
And if you can store them somewhere partially and let people have a little more look at them than just the one-day sale and a yard sale.
Yes, yes. Because
Then
many of the goods that were at a yard sale would also end up here.
they end up here because they didn't sell that day.
That's correct.
But if we keep them for 2 weeks or 6 months, it doesn't make any difference as long as we can keep them
Keep them
and
dry
keep
and
them
safe
protected.
and whatever.
Then give them another chance. And there are things I recognize here from 20 years ago that are perhaps too heavy or too attractive to let go. So we keep some things around.
You got some archaeology going, a little history.
Yeah,
going
there
on
is,
through
and
here.
I used to value that myself. Try to keep some old things around, like a little museum of technology, so that kids could get a better idea of how things used to be.
Well,
perhaps.
one of my favorite examples over there is the ironer, the little on the
Oh, the mangle.
The
used to call
mangle.
them.
That's right. I remember that from my mother's time. When I was a child, I saw these. So it's like that's a piece of history that's not existing anymore. We don't do that with clothing.
Yeah, and there's a lot of things that if you see them, you get a better idea of how things work. There's a piano soundboard back here that you actually see the
harps and the strings and the tune.
And we take things apart on demonstrations sometimes and show, look what's in here, look what the magic little parts, and the kids love that, and so that's a big part of our outreach, is to let the children understand the value of things in a new way. Yeah.
You're doing wonderful work. I'm hoping that in the future, as it becomes more expensive to bring things into our communities, which you're already experiencing here on the island, that more municipalities will take the initiative to build the covered structures to be able to, hey, adventures, I love it. I mean, here we are at the dump, sound, recycle. That municipalities will create those covered, and the insurance, it will end up saving them money, because they're not going to be having to truck stuff as much.
Well, there are jobs involved with handling this stuff too, and and the people who need jobs are more likely to be able to work into those. Like you say, the meek might inherit the earth.
Thank you.
Okay.
Here you're showing it, that the meek are inheriting the earth and having a good time and very creative along with it.
Oh yeah, it's
Thank you.
great fun.
Thank you for joining me. You're watching Peak Moment, community responses for a changing energy future. I'm Janaea Donaldson. Please join us next time.